This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
I want to welcome you to Real Talk. Hope you had a fantastic weekend here in our neck of the woods. The Edmonton Folk Music Festival over these past 4 days, Johnny. It always sort of serves as a bit of a reminder for me, Folk Fest does, that we're into the second half of summer. This is the time where you got to get serious to make the most of it. You must be seeing the same thing, hey? Working the on the wedding circuit. You know, you guys are like pedal to the metal right now this time of year.
Yeah, it's coming to the end of it, but yeah, it's.
Did you get any rest this weekend, pal?
I've seen so many intoxicated people in this city. I won't name any names, but I've seen them at their best. I've seen them at their worst. But it's always nice when it's not nice when summer comes to an end, but it is a little. It's a relief.
The changing of the seasons.
Yeah.
We like the changing of the seasons.
Yeah, and September's kind of like a reset, right?
Yeah.
You get back into your old routine and you get ready for another fiscal year.
You've piqued my curiosity by talking about all the intoxicated people, and then you say I'm not going to name any names, which leads me to believe that were you to name names, it would be of interest to all of us.
They are, because
maybe we should push a little bit on it. Maybe I should ask some follow-up questions here and push you a little bit.
Because I have been doing some pretty prominent weddings this year. I won't name a bunch of them, but I see people. I'm like, oh, I know that person. That person.
People are paying you for your discretion.
Yeah.
So you're going to take it easy right now.
Keep it on lock. Keep it on lock.
Well, we're going to drop names all week long. There's one name I'm really excited to drop this week, but we haven't confirmed with her team 100%, so I'm not going to say anything yet. But we're always working on big interviews. We want to get you the voices that matter, the authorities. I said that in kind of a fun way. I was going to say the authorities. I was going to say the authoritative voices, but the authorities on subjects that people care about, which is why I think last week was so electrifying, as our leadoff guest today signed his name to. That was his clip and his prognostication, not ours, when we talked to Charles Adler last week. He knew we were going to be talking about the province of Alberta's 7-month moratorium on new wind and solar projects, and we wanted to hit it from a bunch of angles. So we got kind of the assessment, implications 101 with Binu from Pembina Institute, who joined us, and I think that she brought a good sort of a steady kind of assessment of here's why they're probably doing this, here's the impact they're probably hoping it'll have, here's what they're telling people, and here's what it may mean for you. And then we got the political side of it, on the government side from the environment minister, and on the energy, on the opposition side from the energy critic, and then from an economist, Andrew Leach. So we sort of wanted to tick a bunch of the boxes, and still you, because you're the most engaged talk audience in Canada, told us it was not enough, which I appreciate. We heard from a pretty prominent Alberta mayor over the weekend privately, and she said to us, there's an entire group of people that you have not given the microphone to. There's an entire perspective, she says, rural municipalities that haven't had their say on this. We thought, okay, we can do better. We can do more. Others have said, help us understand in the first place what this has to do with electricity prices. People care, for the most part, about what's immediately impacting their family right now. We care about planet Earth and whether, humans will be here 7 generations from now, but you also care about, why is my hydro bill, why is my power bill 5 times what it was a year ago? And so today we will endeavor to understand that. The man they call DK, David Gray, is going to join me in studio. This guy's been working in this field for decades. I mean, he was the executive director of the Utilities Consumer Advocate, for example, for the better part of a decade. So, we're going to get some and I said to him, we need layperson's language on this. We need just common sense, straight talk stuff that people like me can understand. We're not going to get into the weeds. We want you, when you're talking to your friends and neighbors, to be able to say, well, here's why we're paying so much right now, and here's what could maybe change that or not. So we'll get into that. We're going to solve the CFL tomorrow. That's coming up. I'm looking forward to that when Travis Currod joins us. And then later in the week, we're going to get into some other stuff. I mean, how is Pierre Poilievre all of a sudden trending toward forming a majority government? That's what the pollsters say. And by the way, should contraception be free? We're going to talk to a Calgary-based doctor who says, yeah, it should, and she's pressing the federal government to pick up that tab. So we don't care that it's the middle of August. We don't care that it's the middle of summer. We're still going pedal to the metal on subjects that we know that you're going to find fascinating. Enough of you told me as much this weekend at Folk Fest. It was great to run into so many real talkers. I think if we did a poll on what was the most popular podcast for people hanging out in the beer garden at Edmonton Folk Music Festival, I think Real Talk would be top 3. Again, based on the conversations.
At the weddings I'm doing too.
That's
more
great.
people come up to me now, I guess because my radio career is kind of in the rear view, but I got one at the last wedding I did, Sparrow Lane, on Saturday. Older woman came up and said, "Hey, I have no idea you as a DJ or anything like that, but you are John Hicks on the Real Talk
That
podcast.
is right.
And I listen every day." She's like, "I don't watch, so I didn't know what you look like, but I
there you
listen every day on Apple Podcasts."
Do you think
so.
she was an even bigger fan when she saw what you looked like?
Of course, yeah. And then she
Yeah.
came up later, intoxicated, and was like, "Everyone
There you
says
go.
you're a great guy."
And then you said your secret's safe with me. I
It's
won't say
always
who you
safe
are.
with me.
Except for our Patreon supporters. They'll be getting an email today with all the names of all the people that you saw hammered over the weekend. I like that. We Know Training is presenting this episode of Real Talk. And, it's not news to anybody. I mean, we're sitting here talking about what your power bill probably looks like, right? Cost of living's gone nuts. I mean, that's just a fact. And hand in hand with that, unfortunately, the cost of doing business has gone up as well. So a whole bunch of businesses are looking for ways to boost their revenue. If that's you, one of the absolute best things you can do is to create a standout training program. We Know Training is your best training partner for creating courses and programs that sell. They've helped associations, regulators, nonprofits, and more generate millions of dollars in revenue without any extra work for their teams in creating, managing, and selling those training courses. If you want to learn more, if this has caught your attention, you can visit weknowtraining.ca today and make sure that you're doing every single thing in your control to find out what they could do to help your business at weknowtraining.ca. Well, he's an Emmy Award winner for his talk radio career. He's an RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award winner. He's the host of the Charles Adler Show podcast, and he joins us the first show of every episode here on Real Talk. It's wonderful to see our pal, Charles Adler. How the hell are you doing, pal?
Is the Danielle Smith government going to put a moratorium on contraception? That's my question. I know. Listen, I get that you're the expert at drilling down on the now, making sure that it applies to what people are thinking now and what electricity bills they're paying now. You're the king of that.
Wow.
But I'm always looking forward. If you can put a moratorium, if you can put the thumb in the dike of wind and solar, what else are you putting your thumb in? And will they put their thumb in and on a whole bunch of social and cultural and call them religious issues that some people in Take Back Alberta and maybe some other precincts in Alberta are concerned about? Will they put the thumb on contraception? That's my question, Ryan.
It's a fair question and an interesting one. I saw that you tweeted about this over the weekend. People should follow you at Charles Adler. Look at this, the great hope for the Democrats. I say it tongue firmly planted in cheek, but Robert Kennedy Jr. wants to see the United States ban abortion. This guy's kind of giving a whole new look to the Democrats.
Yeah. He's a Trojan mule is what he is.
Yeah.
Republican sugar daddies are hoping that they can sponsor him, have him go forward for, it'll cost some money to put him on the ballot because he can't win the Democratic primary. But ultimately what they want on the ballot as an independent to peel off Democratic votes, especially of the most uninformed Democrats, the ones who don't read at all, because they just want that name Kennedy up there. And they just figure, hey, if 1 or 2% of Democrats just want to vote for, quote, a Kennedy, no matter what kind of nutbag he is, if the ones who don't read don't know, a Kennedy is a Kennedy is a Kennedy, that 1 or 2% peeled off
Biden's
vote could put someone like Trump back into power. That's kind of the plan.
Yeah,
so Kennedy is a Trojan mule.
My main thought on the Kennedy thing is that if the Democrats can't figure out a way to sweep that guy off the stage and out of the picture, then they deserve to lose. You know what I mean? If your party is that, if the power of your party is that flaccid, that some guy with his brand of lunacy can come in there. I mean, sure, it's great to have the name Kennedy in American politics, but at the same time, like what he's selling is just so unbelievable that I figure if the Democrats can't make quick work of this guy and get their house in order, then they don't deserve to hold that Oval Office.
Well, yeah, but banning abortion is not going to play well with women. And with other modern people, it's not going to play well with the educated. Democrats can't win women and the educated. It's no different than in Canada. Right now, the Abacus poll shows for the first time, the Liberals are actually behind the Conservatives in women, and they're falling behind in educated. Once again, those two demographics, women and educated people. Liberals in Canada, Democrats in the United States have to own those categories to have a clear shot at power.
Yeah, so, okay, we're jumping around a bit, which this audience doesn't mind, and I sure don't mind. So I want to go back to U.S. politics in just a second for you. But we are going to be talking, I'm going to be talking to Tristan Hopper from the National Post on Wednesday about this polling and about what he thinks Pierre Poilievre is doing. Or maybe it has nothing to do with Pierre Poilievre. But what
it does have, I can.
Okay,
I
sink
don't
your
mean
teeth,
to.
let's go.
I don't mean to stomp on Tristan's grapes, but this
No, you're not. You have a 48-hour head start.
This has F all to do with Pierre Poilievre.
Okay.
This is about inflation, and this is about history. We're living in a time when if someone has been in power for 7 or 8 years, it might as well be 700 or 800 years. People have a low attention span. They want to move on. The idea that they want to move on to Poilievre is just also nutbag material, because Poilievre's negatives are, I just looked at Angus Reid this morning because I prepare before coming on in order to, make things look easy, in order to look like we're just flying by the seat of our pants. We've got to prepare, just like the Marines, just like Ryan Jespersen.
You're like Connor McDavid taking wrist shots in his parents' garage in the middle of August.
That's what I'm doing.
That's what you are.
That's what I'm doing. I'm taking it all down with that wrist shot.
Attaboy.
Connor McDavid. Whatever Connor McDavid is doing right now, I salute, because you talk about a person who prepared. Not only does he prepare with the wrist shots in the garage, everything he eats. Okay, Tom Brady and Connor McDavid had that in common. Very, very careful about what he puts into his body.
It's the only reason Johnny and I aren't pro athletes. We've already discussed this. If we could just be more disciplined on what we put into our bodies, we'd have entirely different careers.
Johnny was about to, I guess, download a bunch of names of people who have problems with alcohol at weddings. Imagine that, drinking at a wedding.
Not problems.
I'm counting on Danielle Smith to put a moratorium on that.
I think
stop people from drinking at weddings.
I think a wedding is one place where, even if you're not, a regular drinker, you kind of, you get into it. You let loose. It's a celebration. But I will say that I have seen some people who I'm like, ooh, I don't think you should be, taking your pants off on the dance floor when there's cameras and video and phones around. So
yeah,
Johnny the Enabler.
Johnny the Enabler. It's maybe you should quit playing
such
banging tracks from the
drink
DJ
as much
booth.
as you want.
Maybe that's the big thing. So, I mean, a lot of the pollsters. So you're hanging out with them. You see eye to eye with them. They're saying that
Angus Reid has pointed out that
10-point lead, man.
Negatives are sky high, and as long as his negatives are sky high, you can't beat somebody with nobody. So what the polls right now are showing
it's that new
is
look.
that Trudeau is beatable.
Yeah, I think it's
ridiculous to jump to the conclusion that people are wanting to hoist Pierre Poilievre on their shoulders, especially when Poilievre, once again, in his conspiratorial quackery that he cannot get out of because he is a conspiratorial quack, whether people like it or not. He's into this WEF thing. It's something that you've discussed with Real Talkers in the last couple of years. And
World Economic
once again,
Forum,
CP did a story. So therefore, the Poilievre decides to call CP a division of the CBC, which it is not. Okay. It's just one of many lies that third-rate con men like to tell in this country. So CP is an independent service, and CP put out the story that Pierre Poilievre is still into these whack job conspiracy theories, like the WEF is running Canada and running the world, and blah, 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 blah. And so Poilievre, shot back about how he's concerned about the Canadian people, and he wants to make sure the Canadian people have the power and not the WEF, not Switzerland. Bring the power back to Canada. Don't let these Swiss gatekeepers get in the way. This is quackery, okay? It's not jobbery. And so the campaign on him, with his own quotes, hasn't even been done yet. So if your unfavorables are at 52%, and the campaign on you hasn't even been done, that makes it a contest, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, I don't believe that he's into the quackery. I believe that he's an opportunist. And I think that, like any other politician, he's saying what he thinks he needs to say to get his support base to where it needs to be to win an election. I think that most politicians that have risen to the level that Pierre Poilievre has risen to, with some exception, and I would include Donald Trump in this, they know what they're doing, Chuck, and they don't believe everything that they're saying. There's no way they can possibly believe everything they're saying, or they wouldn't be smart enough to find their offices downtown. You know what I mean? Like, I think that he gets it.
I know what you mean, and whether he's a nut or trafficking in nut jobbery. The point is, those quotes come back to bite you in the rear end. And when you're involved in conspiratorial stuff, you turn off those two demographics I was talking about, the educated and women. And they matter a lot, and they really matter in the battlegrounds. The conservatives are always lathering themselves up because they get 70% numbers and 75% numbers in rural Canada. Well, here's the math. There is not one single battleground in rural Canada. The Conservatives own rural Canada, and it becomes so bleeping what? The battlegrounds are in the suburbs, mainly the suburbs of Vancouver and Toronto. That's where they have to win. And stuff about the WEF and Pierre Poilievre is going to bring the power back from Switzerland, whether he believes that nonsense or not, doesn't matter. I know, and that's why I believe it, because I know it, that stuff does not work in the burbs of Vancouver and Toronto.
Yeah, conservatives say they're going to spend about $3 million, or at least sources close to the conservatives, marketing Poilievre over the next few months. And you can see his wife Anita just a couple of days ago posted a video, why my husband's doing what he's doing, and it's this continuing effort. Conservatives certainly aren't the first to do it, but to kind of humanize Poilievre, to make him look like less of an attack dog as he has been. He's built his brand on that. Sitting on the Folk Fest Hill just last night, friend of mine doesn't pay much attention to politics, but she was talking about Trudeau, and then she goes, this might surprise some of our friends. She goes, but I really love Pierre. And she'd just been talking about Trudeau, and she goes, but I really love Pierre. And I go, Pierre Trudeau? And she goes, no, Pierre Poilievre. And I go, oh, okay. Interesting. Like, just because she never, imagine, Charles, your friend that talks the least of it. In other words, she's never talked about politics in her life to me. All of a sudden likes Pierre Poilievre. And I go, what is it? Like, not acting incredulous, but right. I was just like, what is it about him? And she goes, to be honest, I just like how he goes after Justin. Like, he's always got the zingers. He's always got the one-liners. And, I think she's looking at it. I don't speak for her, but, I think she's looking for entertainment in politics. Yeah. And so it was Poilievre's, like she said, zingers and one-liners that got her. But another one of her girlfriends leans over and says, you should read about some of his policies. And she's like, I will, and I just kind of turned around and kept listening to Ben Harper sing. That's all I was, it's stories of Trudeau, Harper, and Poilievre from the Hill, I suppose, would be my memoir. But it was kind of an interesting one. Now, obviously, the Conservatives, I think, have seen an opportunity with, and I don't mean to put it this way, but I'll put it this way, with the Trudeau house in disarray to a certain degree.
They're putting out the fact that the Leave It to Beaver family is the Poilievre family.
Exactly. Yeah, everything's perfect at home with the Poilievres. Sure. He's the man that represents family values and steady Eddie conservatism. And the Liberals have, probably a year and a half to try to get things to calm down and for the public memory to fade. And the public memory can fade on anything in a year and a half. That's a fact.
So the tweet that we were talking about last week, right? The Trudeau and his son.
Oh yeah, at the movies.
Teenage son. They go to watch Barbie, and Trudeau's wearing pink, and people get upset. The incels get upset, and the other members of the coalition on the right get upset. That tweet at this moment is over 42 million. That's larger than the population of Canada.
Yeah.
So they could talk about Poilievre, and Poilievre's got the whatever the zingers and whatever. Nobody has the zing. Whether the Conservatives like to hear this or not, nobody has the zing of Justin Trudeau. I mean, who else in this country can put out Taylor Swift might not be able to put out a tweet right now and get 42
Oh,
million,
I don't know
okay?
about
I
that.
don't know about that.
Oh, is that risky business?
No,
Did I just step on the goddess?
Taylor's, yeah. Well, she's just
Taylor
next
Swift
level.
is fantastic.
Taylor's
I'm not
got an
knocking her talent
army.
at all.
Yeah, once
She's got
you-
an
I'm
army.
simply making the point that at any given moment, Trudeau can put out a tweet and get 42 million tweets. Trudeau is not the international star that Taylor Swift is. Trudeau is a Canadian star. Yes, he's known internationally, but Taylor Swift is international. If Taylor Swift was basically a Canadian content queen, I don't know if she could get 42 million tweets by putting out as little as Trudeau put out, and the entire right jumped on it. So that's the point I'm making. And if I'm making it carelessly or callously, sorry.
Well,
The point has to be made.
You just did this. Like, Connor Bedard is this 18-year-old that's coming in from the Regina Pats. He's going to go play for the Chicago Blackhawks, and some people will say, could he have as much of an impact as former Blackhawk Jonathan Taves, or he has this snapshot everyone's talking about, like could he have a snapshot like Luc Robitaille, and then you just went straight for it. You were like, could he be Gretzky? Invoking the Taylor Swift name is just like Johnny right away just went, oh boy.
Of course.
It's like Justin Bieber,
all right, so-
Taylor Swift.
Call me manipulative, okay? Yes, I invoke Taylor Swift. What am I going to do? Invoke Taylor Horowitz? If I said Taylor Horowitz, wouldn't mean anything.
Wouldn't
But
land.
People go, Taylor Swift, oh my God.
Yes, that's right. So can a single dad win an election? Are Canadians ready for that?
A single, because Trudeau is a single dad.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people mark an X on the ballot based on that.
I'd be curious to see. I'd be curious to see if when it all comes down to it, people like polling right now. It's interesting. It gives us in the middle of August something to talk about on a talk show. That's great. But I don't know that like polling right now actually matters at all.
No, it does. It doesn't.
If you're working for the Conservatives,
by the way,
it's encouraging.
But here's what else matters. We can talk about Taylor Swift. We can talk about some of these others. I mean, Taylor Swift has been able to sustain and grow for many years. That's one of the reasons she's a superstar, because a lot of people have one hit, two hits, whatever. People get bored quickly. Whatever Poilievre is doing right now, that's the zingers. It could get very tiresome and tedious, even for your friend who was talking to you on the weekend. I mean, the next election is 2 years away. It's impossible, and I mean impossible today to determine what will be still a hit or tedious and tired 2 years ago. All I know is that Trudeau, in Canadian terms, has been a superstar now for about a decade. That tells me something.
Well, his dad did it, right? 1980.
Yeah, it was.
Pierre was a single dad.
Yeah, single at the time. 1980.
There you go.
He was divorced. Margaret was doing her thing, and
So
yeah. He had
Nobody,
that kind of.
Ryan, let's be serious for a moment here. Do you think anybody thinks that Justin Trudeau is a bad dad? Do you think that anybody
not
thinks that Justin
necessarily what I'm
Trudeau's children
getting
aren't
at.
being raised properly or aren't being mentored by Justin Trudeau?
Well, no, but here's the thing: is
Seriously.
I don't personally think that is the question. I think that the question is if the Conservatives are working so hard to market or to brand Poilievre as like the loving, doting father. If the Conservatives, back in the day, like what what the tough look was for the Conservatives was like Prime Minister Stephen Harper dropping his son Ben off at school and shaking his hand instead of hugging him. There's always just been this, like, hello, boy, like, have a prosperous day. It's like, no,
So human.
but like, does
So
anybody think
warm and
Stephen
fuzzy.
Harper doesn't love his kids? No, I'm just,
Harper.
I'm just
Harper-
saying, like, for some reason, obviously, people that know more than we do, or at least as much as we do, about making an impact on the public and shaping public opinion and getting votes. That's what they care about the most. They obviously prioritize the optic that everything's great at home and this is your classic Canadian family, and then we can have conversations about what's the definition of family and what's the definition. Like,
Wait,
we can
Ryan,
go there, but people do care.
Okay, can I put a moratorium on this for a moment and just
here we
put
go.
up the calendar?
Nice
Okay,
full circle.
We're in the 2020s right now.
Yeah.
Not the 1920s. 70 million, not 70 million people, most of whom are conservative in the United States, voted for a guy who was regularly planking and paying porn stars. So if the conservatives in the States were ready to vote for a guy, enthusiastically vote for a guy who was sleeping with porn stars, you think it's a huge problem that Justin and Sophie aren't together right now?
I think that Donald Trump is on an island. That's one of the things that I find so fascinating about him is nobody else could even remotely get away with a tenth of the stuff he gets away with. Like, imagine if anybody else called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. Like, that's just one example out of 1,000 off the top of my head. Imagine if one person tried to do even one thing that he does. I mean, imagine if another president was hoarding documents at their personal residence, including boxes of classified information stacked in the bathroom by the toilet. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, let alone quarterbacking and manifesting and encouraging and planting and watering an insurrection, an attack on the democracy of the very nation that you seek to lead again, and still there's going to be 50+ million people that can't wait to pull out their pencils and mark an X in the spot that says, "We forgive you now, then, and forevermore."
On the list, you didn't include his son-in-law shaking down the Saudis for billions of dollars.
Well, because then people would invoke Hunter Biden and the Russians, and then it would get sloppy and messy. And I think you get my point. I don't think
for the record, I'm willing to stimulate that and stipulate. Okay, stimulate and stipulate. That's two S's. Yeah. That Pierre Poilievre is not sleeping with porn stars. Okay,
you're going to put your neck out there, and
I'm gonna stick the neck.
Okay,
I'm gonna giraffe this one. Okay, I'm gonna stick the neck right out. And
yeah.
There's no porn star issue with.
We don't get stories like that in Canada. Not to say, I'm trying to think of, like, back in the day there was the what did they call themselves? It was like a play off the Rat Pack, but it was like Raheem Jaffer and Jason Kenney and all those young. Not the Brat Pack. What did the Snack Pack, I think they called them, or something like that. Anyway, but it was like that group of, like, young, brash, confident, kind of party animal conservative MPs. These were the young guys. Like, Kenny was an MP, like, late 20s. Raheem Jaffer ran into some trouble. Edmonton area MP, optically and otherwise, possession of cocaine.
Is he the guy that did an impersonation of himself on a voicemail or something?
Impersonation of himself. That sounds more like a Jonathan Dennis type move.
He sent someone some voicemail. I think he was impersonating somebody. It was him.
But Jaffer got embroiled in a story involving cocaine. And that was enough to kind of bring down his political career.
It wasn't just cocaine. I think the headline was, and it was a Toronto Star headline, so it wasn't, some piece of tabloid trash. It was the Toronto Star, and I think the headline was "Cocaine and Busty Hookers."
Yeah. So there you go. And in the States, you find cocaine in the White House, and it's like barely a ripple. Johnny, we mentioned on the show for 45 seconds, and that was about it. So Canadians,
you missed the days
we don't
when
get
Canadian
the same
news was filled with stuff like with cocaine and busty hookers. Was that a more interesting time to be a commentator than just talking about putting a sock in wind farms?
This is back to 2009, Raheem Jaffer. I forgot about the impaired driving charge, but I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. That's a fact. He was stopped in a Ford Escape traveling at a high speed.
He was a train wreck, Ryan. He was a train wreck.
37 years old.
Good-looking guy, but he was a train wreck.
Yeah. So there you go. And that was kind of probably the end of it.
Yeah.
So before we go, I did pull a clip. This is Chuck Todd. Mike Pence wants to be president, obviously.
Yes.
And he talked to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, and Chuck wants to know, and Chuck, I don't want to steal your thunder, so you'll take this on. But we'll remember MAGA Republicans, Make America Great Again Republicans. These are the ones that wanted to literally lynch Mike Pence on January 6th. So Chuck Todd asks, are you seriously a MAGA Republican? And here's what he had to say.
Do you consider yourself a MAGA Republican?
I'm incredibly proud of what we did in the Trump-Pence administration for 4 years, and you better believe it. In those 4 years, after 8 years of the slowest recovery since the Great Depression, 8 years under Barack Obama and Joe Biden that saw military cuts that hollowed out our military, 8 years of liberals on our courts. Under the Trump-Pence administration, with the support of MAGA Americans, we literally did make America great again.
Do you feel like you're a MAGA Republican or not?
That pandemic struck, and Look, I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. I've always said that.
Yeah.
People who know me know those are my values, those are my ideals, and I really believe that the agenda that I've always been about, that I'm looking forward to taking to that debate stage, is the agenda that'll bring this country all the way back.
And believe it or not.
Okay. So, these are the guys that wanted to murder him, Charles.
Christian, conservative, and Republican, that order, than to say I'm an idiot and a squirrel and a former Veep in that order. But I'll just say this, a man much smarter than me once said that the prospect of a hanging, concentrates one's mind. And I guess what that person never said was one has to have a mind. And Pence isn't blessed with much of that. Yes, he's a conservative, he's a Christian, he's a Republican, I believe all those things. But he's just not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
You will catch Charles Adler, the first episode of every single week, right here on Real Talkie. If you want more after that, you can subscribe to the Charles Adler podcast. Get that every single day. And I like this 3-minute thing that you're doing as well. It's like basically your take on the top news headlines weekdays.
Yeah.
3 minutes, quick hits.
Yeah, 3 minutes that matter. I like to boil it down. And I do it without being smug.
Relatively speaking. Yeah. We love you, buddy.
And we love you, Mike Pence.
Speak
Raw to Christians, conservatives, and Republicans.
Yeah, that's right. We'll see how that works out for him. Talk to you in a week, Chuck.
You bet.
Coming up in just a second, why your electricity bills are so high, like maybe 5 times higher than they probably should be. David Gray's going to join us. He's got a lot of experience in this space, and a whole bunch of you wanted to hear him on the show, so he's made the trip in studio. That's coming up in 2 minutes. Before we do that, I want to remind you what Friesen Brothers has going on right now. A lot of you are going to be hitting the road. You're going to be visiting friends. Maybe it's picnic season. You want to grab something quick to take to the beach or whatever your favorite music festival is. Friesen Brothers is now stocking BC blueberries. You can choose from convenient cases, or you can opt for bulk blueberries by purchasing an 8-pound box. 8-pound box would be enough for our 1-year-old Noah for like a day and a half. Loves his blueberries. These are ideal for summer smoothies, family sharing, or even making your own homemade blueberry jam to enjoy through the winter. There's more information in the flyer at friesen.com. You can get them and you can check out that flyer. Again, I recommend the Family Essentials flyer too. Great recipe ideas, quality food for low prices at Friesen Brothers for more than 65 years. Alberta grown and Alberta owned. I wanted to give a big shout out to our friends at Complete Care Restoration. This is a tough time of year. I know for a lot of Albertans, everything was going perfectly fine in the summer months, and then the next thing you know, a fire impacts your community. Or the next thing you know, that few days in a row of heavy rains, and then your basement floods, and then all of a sudden you got a big, huge mess on your hands. If this is the gut punch that you're dealing with, we recommend you give a quick call to our friends at Complete Care Restoration. They've been around for more than a decade, a family-owned business that is going to give you the professionalism that your project deserves and that personal touch, the one that we've experienced. We've seen them in action. This is a team that we absolutely recommend without hesitation. 2 thumbs up. You can find them online at completecarerestoration.ca or give them a call, 780-454-0776. Our friends at Eden Landscaping have spent this weekend in our yard, and we're so thrilled. Johnny, I posted a quick video on my Instagram of the progress of our backyard overhaul, and I was promptly and immediately told to take it down from my wife. She says, "We haven't done the reveal yet. What are you doing?" So for those of you that follow my Instagram stories, a few of you saw a sneak peek. I was not authorized to share. We're super excited about this because it's working out exactly how you hope when you invest in a landscaping project. Our family's sticking to a budget. We have to. We're a regular family just like you, but at the same time, we had a big vision. We want to squeeze everything we can out of this investment, and Mike and his team at Eden Landscaping are doing exactly that for us. We're going to be telling you about that finished product and showing it all off in the weeks to come. Right now, you can get your conversation with them started at landscapeedmonton.ca. And I wanted to make a quick mention to our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. I was taking a look at their social media over the weekend, and we had a total. So in the Northwest Edmonton Dairy Queens, about 112 grand raised on Miracle Treat Day for the Stollery. In Sherwood Park at their Baseline Road location, another 36 grand. If I'm doing the quick math off the top of my head, we're looking at just under $150,000 for the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation. And I want to thank you, Real Talkers, for giving hope. I know that so many of you showed up because you were tagging us on your Instagram posts. You were telling us about it in person. We saw it on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you for buying blizzards to support children and teen health care in Western Canada through the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation. It's always a great day to visit the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. When you're there, you make sure you tell them that Real Talk sent you. That's the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. You know, if you're one of those and you're listening right now and you're like, I'd love to take the kids somewhere, I'd love to treat the kids, but the family budget this month just isn't allowing for it. You're trying to stretch your dollars everywhere you can. You think you're doing all right. Interest rates are up on the credit card. The variable rate line of credit is costing you more. Your mortgage is costing you more. Fuel's costing you more. I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound. We're living that same reality. And then you get your utility bill and you see, there's got to be a mistake, right? Like, is everybody leaving all the lights on? Did a neighbor plug a generator into our house? Is something why is our power bill so much? Well, so many of you have been asking that question, and we wanted to get the answer from somebody who knows what they're talking about. David Gray has worked as an energy economist. He was trained right here in Alberta at the University of Calgary. He's worked as a load forecaster, a system planner in Northwest Territories, as an analyst for gas and electric rates. He was the executive director of the Utilities Consumer Advocate through the 2000s, and he's worked as a consultant on rates and energy efficiency across North America up until just a couple of years ago when he closed his practice and launched a philanthropic venture, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But it's a real pleasure to welcome David Gray to the show in studio. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. This is fantastic. This is, you see the little part of it on air, but you never see the whole thing. It's really a great scene. And I just have to say, just riffing on your results from Dairy Queen, I love this town. That people will go out of their way to help other people is the best thing about Edmonton.
$150K they raise in one day.
Yeah, I know.
For the Stollery.
Yeah, I know. And you didn't even talk St. Albert. I think I counted for about $500 worth of stuff.
Attaboy. Well, we were encouraging people, we were like, go buy 30 blizzards, go buy 40 blizzards, buy blizzards for your whole office or for the whole soccer team or whatever. Right. And I think people obviously did.
Intermittent fasting will take care of whatever results that you could have.
Yeah, I keep hearing about this. People keep telling me that it works. There's probably some segue there for me to start getting into power conversation here.
Well, if I can, let me segue because I'd like to say I spent my first part of my career in Hay River, Northwest Territories as the economist for NWT Power. Hay River and Fort Smith are being airlifted, evacuated because of forest fires right now. Jeez. So I just wanted to, say I pray for the people that are there able to get out safe. So many friends up there.
Yeah. I mean, and these are the ones that are obviously that connects with you personally. I can see it on your face. And we see stories like last week. We couldn't ignore the story out of Lahaina on Maui. The death toll there when we talked about it was in the 30s, and that stopped me in my tracks. Thankfully, and you knock on wood in Canada, and I know that this can change in an instant, but whether it's the fires in Lytton that basically leveled that BC community, a while ago, or in like Slave Lake, Fort McMurray, I recognize that there were a couple of motor vehicle accidents, and there were some unfortunate circumstances. We don't know the longer term effects of firefighters and some of the stuff that they're breathing in and that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, we don't see the property damage is astronomical and off the charts. But thankfully, we haven't seen high fatality numbers. To see now in Lahaina, they're saying it's 80 plus. After the weekend, and people are still missing. I'm having a really hard time wrapping my mind around that.
I agree with what Charles had to say, is that there's no one in the world looking at Maui doubting climate change.
Yeah. When in your career, how much of a conversation? Kind of get into this, and I've encouraged you to sort of be this, and this would not be new for you to be kind of a voice looking out for consumers in this interview to help the average person, understand. Let's not get into the weeds and industry jargon and all that kind of stuff. But when you started working, you graduate in '89 as an energy economist, and the better part of your career has been in this field. Were people talking about the environmental impact of power generation and stuff like that in the '90s and into the early 2000s? Has this been on the radar of the big producers? And
well, not only that, Alberta at one point was the world leader in carbon credit exchange. It had a plan and was the first to put in a carbon tax, right? We had this plan, and it all came together under the Stelmach government that would have been just spot on, would have put us in great shape to continue to produce hydrocarbons while offsetting that with energy efficiency and other types of programs. We had the opportunity to really grab the bull by the horns and be the leader, but in Alberta, if it isn't combustible, it's communism. Right? So we're at where we're at with what are really ridiculous arguments about why we shouldn't be the green energy capital of the world.
What are you making of the story that Chuck had some fun with it this morning? This moratorium on wind and solar. I've got letters from people, and I've got one here from Garth. I wanted to acknowledge. We got his email, and Garth's an ardent real talker and spends a lot of time listening to the show. But he says that he's disappointed. He's concerned to see people buying in and drinking the Kool-Aid on wind and solar. We've got some of our audience members that are saying a pause is prudent. I saw that the mayor of Red Deer County today, and obviously that's a big oil and gas part of the province, a lot of people that work in oil and gas services in that part of the province, but saying that this is a prudent move from the Danielle Smith Conservatives. And then I see other people saying, consider the source. Opposition energy critic last week, but Najwan Al-Junaid says to us, when's the last time that the government just hit pause for a half a year on a multi-billion-dollar industry? And you'd have to think long and hard to come up with an answer there. So
it's the beginning of the NDP. It's a very stupid thing to do, and I'll tell you why. The reason is you only get to be a flaky government once before everybody readjusts their risk perspective in terms of government regulatory risk.
Okay.
So you only get to be flaky and pause at once. Now, the problem is the NDP did something that was just as silly, both for solar and renewable and then energy efficiency, that they said, oh, hey, we're going to have this program, we're going to pay for it, and it's going to be 2 years away. So everybody that I knew who was in the solar industry, early adopters, early proponents of solar, got put out of business. And then I got put out of business doing industrial energy efficiency for the same reason. The road to hell is paved in good intentions, and I can understand maybe they've had the intention of trying to adjust how these things are going to be fixed in the future, but the biggest problem they have is they're missing the fundamental problem, which is that we have a broken electrical wholesale market, and nothing really good is going to happen in Alberta until we can sort that out.
So you're saying that the NDP has screwed this up, and you're saying that the UCP are screwing this up. Is that your assessment?
Yeah.
Politicians are just screwing this up.
It seems like you can't get in to be the Minister of Energy without misunderstanding electricity.
Huh. Okay.
The thing that drives me nuts is the extent to which, the David Staples very simplified view of the world is the one that's driving people's opinions about renewable energy and other things.
Okay, the Edmonton Journal columnist, let's not take for granted that everybody has or hasn't read what he had to say.
Yeah.
All I saw was a tweet talking about wind turbines, the height of the Calgary Tower in people's backyards.
I forget sometimes that you're bad and nationwide.
Yeah. Well, it's just, not everybody reads Staples. So
Yeah. It's he gets to this, we've got to back up every kilowatt of renewables with thermal. which is a gross simplification of the actual calculation that you do in terms of loss of load probability. But it doesn't even matter because we haven't done anything like that since 2000. We have an electricity market, and the thing you need to talk about is what measures are you going to put into the electricity market to ensure that prices are stable, that it's reliable, that you have the right type of generation coming on. And all of those are basic economic market functions that will happen if you have the market set up such that it has the right incentives. We have a market that they cobbled together in the 90s using the state-of-the-art derivative theories of the day, and it doesn't work. It doesn't put the right incentives in place to make sure that generators are reliable and are cost effective.
But so Staples isn't alone in this. If you look at the spirit of the Premier's comments, she's saying, and she was trading punches with the, or at least let me say, she was lobbing bombs at the federal environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, over the weekend. I saw, implying that he kind of doesn't understand the pressure that Alberta's grid is under. And the Premier tweeted out a graph that she says, and people can find it themselves on her Twitter account. She's unblocked like a ton of people, by the way, and Real Talk's taking credit for that, by the way. So more people can see her tweets now, but she says, Minister Guilbeault, here are several instances last winter when Alberta's grid was barely able to keep up with demand. She says, and for this reason, we can't over-rely on wind and solar, or we're going to have to roll out brownouts and blackouts.
Well, let's just unpack that.
Let's unpack that.
Because you have the same problem in Texas. Now, why do they have that problem? We have an energy-only electricity market, which means you only generate, or you only pay if you generate, right? If you don't generate, you don't get any money. So how much money are wind and solar facilities making when they don't generate? Is it zero? It's zero. Okay? We don't pay those guys for reliability. We pay them for cheap energy, and it's the cheapest energy we've got. We have wind power in Alberta at under 4 cents a kilowatt hour, locked in for 20 years. That's the cheapest energy we've got. You want the most expensive energy right now, it's those gas-fired plants that, because of their market position, are able to drive the price through the roof using market power, which we need to get to. But the long and the short of it is the reason that we have reliability problems isn't renewables. It's because we don't provide enough money in the system for people to build peaking plants. That's been the problem with this market and the Texas market from the beginning, that they assumed you would get the same amount of reliability as a regulated system with a $1,000 price cap. I had a company, Boston Consulting, investigate that when we were at the Utilities Consumer Advocate, and it's closer to $20,000 a megawatt hour. So the real problem we've got in terms of reliability is we don't pay enough for peak when we have those shortages, and that would fix it in a heartbeat.
Okay, but I see a bunch of people, and I think that commentators know, or some of them do, and I won't call it good faith, that if they obfuscate the conversation, it's easy to scare people off asking questions by making them feel uncomfortable in a conversation, right? You don't understand this. You don't understand the premise. Please tell me you know what this means. If you don't know what this means, you have no business talking about this. And so the average person fades away, and they shut up, and then they keep paying. And this is how human beings are manipulated in circumstances. We want to be able to answer back. So I see people saying, you don't know the first thing about integrating wind and solar into the grid. You don't know how costly that would be. You don't understand everything that comes along with this. The average person doesn't. So sit down and shut up. That's what the average person's being told to do right now.
I've forgotten more about electricity than most of these guys know.
Okay, so let's go.
So the problem we have in the Alberta market, the reason that the prices are able to go up so high is that in designing it, they came up with this unique system called economic withholding. In most other commodity markets, you have all your trading going on in your forwards markets. So you have a contract that I'm going to supply natural gas to you. I'm going to supply you 10 gigajoules natural gas in November at such and such a price. We have a contract. I go to the natural gas pipeline and I say, here's my contract. They say, okay, you can transport, and that transaction is completed. when we look at electricity, we don't have any of that. We're trying to make a spot market work like a forward market with various financial jiggery-pokery, and it doesn't work for shit. Is the fundamental problem. That we have this system where the normal pricing is that as soon as somebody gets enough market power, which is now TransAlta and Harvest, you can withhold a little bit of supply to drive the price up. So that's what's taken the price from what was about 6 cents a kilowatt hour, 7 cents a kilowatt hour in 2021 to 30 now. You can look up the study from the University of Calgary. Well, it's the RRO is I think 32.
Okay.
So yeah, it's gone
That's
up.
the
like,
regulated rate option.
Yeah, it's gone up 5 times because of economic withholding, not fuel prices, not inflation, not anything else. You can look at the University of Calgary Public Policy School did a paper about this in 22 because it's just clear. I mean, I railed about this in 2015 when it was TransCanada doing it before the end of the power purchase agreements, because it's just a stupid system, right? Like it, literally, you've given 4 companies the ability to raise the price for a fundamental commodity that affects every other business in the province, every other business, every other home. And I can't for the life of me understand why the Chamber of Commerce isn't up in arms about power companies soaking every other company in Alberta.
Why don't you think they are?
They've been out of the regulatory game since 2007. The biggest, the other side of the problem that we have in this province is that the companies have essentially taken away all of the opportunities for consumers to weigh in through the regulatory process. It's a bit of a mess. It really honestly is.
So, when it comes to sorting this out, when it comes to somebody going, I don't know how much longer I can pay X amount to keep the lights on or whatever they're running off power, is there any reason for optimism? Does something need to change? Could something change? Would a government feel an impetus to change? Help us understand where this could go from here for people that are trying to get a sense of what the fall or the winter might look like.
The winter is going to be bad again. It's basically whenever we are close to the demand and supply being unbalanced. And that can happen for a lot of different reasons. It can happen for plants being out for maintenance. It can happen because a plant breaks and goes offline. Regardless, you end up with a situation where these few companies can game the market. And it doesn't have anything to do really with supply or demand. It's, are they in a position where they control the pricing? Are they in a position where they can say, no, power isn't going to be 6 cents today, it's going to be 60.
And that's literally what this boils down to? That's not oversimplifying the conversation? It's
the best summary I've seen, and it's from our friend in the other podcast, the other political podcast, and it's as simple as they let 4 companies drive the price up for everybody else in Alberta.
Which other political? You can give others a shout out.
So that was the breakdown.
Oh, the breakdown with Nate Pike. There you
Nate,
go. Okay, yeah, they do a good job. So people are just going to sit here and what's the plan? What can people do? Can people do anything? There's nothing people can do. Just sit and take it.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Or you could get a government in that actually wants to fix the system.
But you've said that neither is capable. Well, you haven't said that.
No, I haven't said
you didn't say that.
Yeah.
But you did say that both have blown it.
Both have blown it in terms of renewables. I would say the NDP did it on good intentions, but the road to hell, etc.
Yeah.
With this particular moratorium, I think it's more of a cruise missile aimed at enviro Barbies like me, but.
Yeah.
It seems entirely political. It's certainly not economic.
Yeah. I mean, I don't doubt that it's political. There's no doubt about that. I'd be curious to see, and we asked the question, I know it's a fair question to ask. It's an obvious question to ask, and that is, what are the longer-term economic impacts on the province? Number one, just with scaring off investment, what message does it send? You look at premiers that, they all do it. I think of Doug Ford is one that like hangs the "Open for Business" sign in Ontario, and every politician will say our jurisdiction X is open for business, and I just think that this sends the opposite message, which is or closed for certain types of business, and so I think that that's something that we're keeping an eye on, a storyline we're keeping an eye on. But I was sure hoping that there would be more reason for optimism for some people that these prices might come down.
They will come down probably sometime in the summer next year when one of the plants is being refurbished to go from coal to natural gas is back on. I'm forgetting which exact one that is. I think it's Genesee 2.
Okay.
But the long and the short of it is that next summer prices should be a little bit more normal, but my expectation is they're not going to be back to where they should be, which is under 10 cents. They'll be still high.
Does the average Albertan get burned because the market is deregulated?
We get burned because our market is stupid.
Yeah.
I think our market, if it was set up like the natural gas market, which trades mostly on the futures rather than on the spot, would actually work like a hot dam. And in many ways, it's been a real boon for the province to allow people to come in with private generation and do new things. But the problem we have is our market is cornered. The mechanism they decided to use to signal that we need more generation is to let the biggest companies drive the price up via this economic withholding strategy. And you end up getting these very lumpy price adjustments where the price will, go from 6 to 30 for 2 or 3 years and then drop back down.
Ken, in our live chat, wants to know about this capacity market that was planned to start in 2019. He had us ask a similar question to Dr. Andrew Leach in our interview, and people can check that out last week. It was on Thursday. He wonders, would that have helped, or would NGs have avoided?
The capacity market could have helped in some ways, but the fundamental problem is with the energy side of our market that it needs to be forward, firm market.
Can you explain in layperson's terms, like explain
Sure.
to a grade 10 class?
So here's
what
the
we're
problem.
talking about?
Let's say we come to an agreement. I'm a generator. You're a consumer.
Okay.
You're buying power for your customers, and we come to an agreement. And I'm going to sell you power at $10 a megawatt hour, a penny a kilowatt hour, but I don't generate any. Oops. Well, if it was a real market, there would be significant physical repercussions to me as a seller. But in our market, there isn't.
Because you sold something you don't have.
All that happens is we settle financially later. And that's the biggest problem with our market. That's why it doesn't work the way it should, responding to supply and demand.
Whose market's really, if Alberta's is stupid, like you've described, to use your word, whose is really smart and why?
Texas has gotten better. They've moved more towards everything trading on the forwards. So if you look at natural gas, you have to have a contract to get onto the system. You have to have a contract with somebody that I'm selling in order to get your gas delivered to them. We just need to do the same thing in electricity. We need to make it so that it's firm, you don't get these financial games, and that the generators are responsible for reliability.
Sometimes when we've got a guest on, I'll read an email from an audience member, and
Sure.
you can respond to it. I thought this was interesting. This from Garth. You sent an email, sent it this morning at 4:58. Attaboy, Garth. Up and at him early. He says, Jespo, it looks like some of my fellow Real Talkers have been sipping that wind and solar only Kool-Aid a bit too much. So the Alberta government decides to pause some of these renewable projects. It's about time somebody had the guts to admit that wind and solar only are about as reliable as seeking warmth from a pair of Speedos in -40. I mean, nobody said wind and solar anyway, but I'll stick to his email. He says, seriously, do you want to talk about the unreliability of wind and solar in Alberta winters? Those turbines are a joke in such conditions. Do you know they need transmission oil, hydraulic oil, and probably a bunch of other things, all that have to stay warm in order for a high KVA turbine to continue working? And don't even get me started on how they have to use the power they generate to keep from freezing solid. What a genius idea, Alberta getting its base load supply from wind and solar. Garth's kind of arguing in bad faith, but I wanted to keep reading the email. He says, don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing wind and solar entirely. They definitely have a role in cutting down emissions, decreasing our carbon footprint. He says, just so you know, I have solar panels on my house. He says, I've been involved in some hefty megawatt wind ventures over in Jamaica, so I have a decent grasp on the subject. Anyway, let's not forget how these supposed green solutions become as efficient as a sloth on a cold day when the temperatures drop. The laws of physics don't care about your climate change agenda, but who cares about efficiency when you can virtue signal to all those climate warriors? And speaking of those climate warriors, don't you just love how the feds and their buddies are ready to cut off their noses to spite their faces? So desperate to pat themselves on the back for being green, they're willing to ignore the practical challenges, the reality on the ground. They'd rather freeze in the dark with a smile on their face than admit that maybe standalone renewables just aren't the golden ticket they thought that they were, at least not yet. So, Ryan, let's all keep sipping that standalone renewable energy Kool-Aid if it makes you feel good. But the Alberta government is correct to pump the brakes on these projects and take a hard look at real-world implications, because at the end of the day, you can't power a province on good intentions and wishful thinking. That from Garth.
Can you repeat the line he said in there about physics and global warming?
I don't know, where was it?
Yeah, your physics doesn't care about
your
your
physics
climate
doesn't
conspiracy.
care about your climate change agenda or something.
Physics is exactly why there's a climate change theory. You know where there isn't a climate change controversy? Venus. There's no coal lobby.
Okay.
Yeah, there's got to be a point at which we say, what you're saying is stupid and crazy, right? We have consensus from the world scientists as to what's going on. We could look outside at the forest fire smoke that's coming our way and see what's going outside. This notion that we can just, put our head in the sand and say that climate change is some sort of conspiracy is the worst kind of stupid.
Well, I'm glad you were willing to take on that email head on. I mean, I understand that, for a lot of people, and I don't know if Garth is presenting that, based on his sincere feeling or not, but I haven't seen anybody suggest that Alberta, I haven't seen anybody suggest that Alberta will be able to sustain or meet its energy requirements solely with wind and solar. But it strikes me as a civilian, and this is why we get the experts on the show, but as a civilian, it strikes me as prudent, and it strikes me as the intelligent move to look to new tech and integrate new tech to find a way to decrease our carbon footprint and control our emissions, which we know we need to do.
Well, if anything he said about wind turbines was correct, no one would build them. Right. So let me just point to the market and say you're obviously wrong. But the second part of that, in terms of reliability, do people really think that the clockwork like coming on and coming off of solar panels during the day is more difficult to manage than Genesee 2 coming off with a catastrophic failure? Because that happens all the time, right? We have 2,000 megawatt plants that can drop 500 megawatts because the turbine is imbalanced or they had a shunt. We plan for things that cause power outages and cover them off all the time and have forever. But this notion that renewables are what are causing us reliability problems is bunkum. We don't pay renewables for reliability. We pay them for cheap energy. We pay peaking plants for reliability, and we don't pay them enough. And that's why we have issues both in Texas and in Alberta, which are the only two places with energy-only electricity markets with reliability.
You mentioned Texas. What is Dallas-Fort Worth doing that's so special? I keep hearing people talking about Dallas-Fort Worth.
Well, Dallas-Fort Worth is, as they say, has 4 registered environmentalists, and they are likely to be the first major metropolitan area to be 100% green energy powered. I love Texas. Spend a lot of time there. Texas doesn't care about your, labels. They want to make money. And so Texas had a huge renewable influx just like us. And just like us, they tried to blame that on the reliability problems. It's not the case. But it's, there's no antipathy between the oil and gas sector and the green energy sector in Texas. It's all, let's go make some money. And I wish we would do that here, because this is actually where we lose the most. Our potential is to have the biggest green energy basin in the world between Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia and the Northwest Territories, we could produce more hydro, wind, solar, and geothermal than almost anywhere else in North America. It's one of the last great untapped green energy resources. If the feds would put up the money and negotiate with the states so that we could have an export agreement, we could very quickly, like within 10 years, be a major exporter of green electricity to those millions and millions and millions of E150s that are going to be built in the U.S. with their new inflation money. But no, let's go back to, if it's not combustion, it's communism, right? We just have this weird hatred for anything that isn't oil and gas here, like it runs in our veins.
But you can't tell me that the conventional or traditional oil and gas lobby is any less powerful in Texas.
Oddly enough, I can.
Really?
They have not been able to take over the regulatory system, the Texas Railroad Commission, like we've seen here with both the Utilities Commission and the Energy Board.
Wow. Have we missed anything? Are there any important points you're going to walk out of here and go, shoot, I wish we would have mentioned that. I wish we would have talked about that.
If they really wanted to look after consumers, like fix the electricity market. We all know it's been broken. It's been broken for years. Make it work like the gas market, and everybody would be better off. The generators would be better off. It's more predictable. Consumers would be way better off. I mean, but until you fix that, it's just going to be the same mess that it is.
It's interesting. I always try to get people to, this is kind of how I pay attention to what politicians have to say. And that's just like, what are they focusing on? What's most relevant to the story? And what are they ignoring? And it's pretty interesting to hear politicians talking right now in the context of this pause on renewables and wind and solar. Despite the fact that pollsters will probably tell you that this next federal election will be fought on affordability and cost of living, obviously other issues can arise.
Yep.
No politicians in government or in opposition right now are talking about that. And that is because it's much more powerful of a message to imply or to suggest to people that if we move forward with this, renewables, if we continue going down this path, cutting emissions, et cetera, then we could find ourselves in minus 30, and your home, you won't be able to heat it. And people start thinking about their own families, and they start thinking about what it would be like. Ralph Klein wanted the Eastern bastards to freeze in the dark. People start thinking about what would it be like if my family was freezing in the dark. And because they don't like the thought of that, their kids crying out from the bedroom, "Daddy," as they're under 5 blankets, because Alberta looked to wind and solar, they automatically push back on it. And I think that that's really interesting, and I think that that's really telling to a certain degree.
Fear is the easiest thing to use to motivate people to do something against their own interests. I come from a public utilities background, and I think that's probably what's different between me and like Andrew Leach, for example. I have lots of respect for Andrew, smart guy, but he doesn't come from a public utilities, public service background. And to me, that's what's gone missing. Is that whereas we used to celebrate, the linemen going out at minus 30 to keep the power on, now we're celebrating guys doing energy trading and buying Ferraris, right? It's a fundamental change in the ethos of public utilities, and I think that if they returned to the notion of public service, people wouldn't be quite so frustrated with them.
Is there a Canadian jurisdiction that's doing it really well?
In terms of integrating all this stuff, Quebec.
People here don't like to hear that.
Ben, c'est pas mon problème, là.
Okay, so what's one thing real quick that Quebec's doing really well?
They've been a major exporter of green energy forever, right? From hydro, and now they're just adding to that with wind. But their wind potential is nothing like ours. I mean, it is a tragedy that if we forego this opportunity for purely BS political reasons, that will be a real tragedy. We have great potential to have, decades and decades of green energy production sales powering this province and our economy.
Dave, thanks for coming in and sort of like shining some light on this, helping us better understand it. We always want our audience to feel like they're equipped to get into conversations with people from an informed perspective and to kind of cut through the BS. And so I appreciate that. I'm not going to lie. I was hoping you could give us some secret on how we can cut our power bills by 85%, but maybe that's out of your hands for now. For now.
It gets back to physics, right?
Yeah. Okay. That's always an inconvenient truth. In your retirement, so to speak, you've launched a philanthropic venture, and people can check it out online at artforgood.ca. The number 4, artforgood.ca, where art meets heart. And I'm absolutely thrilled that as of this morning, and we'll link to this in the show notes, we're going to put it out on all of our socials, people can show their support for the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship by picking up a beautiful print titled Emerald Waters. You brought it in. Do you want to grab it? Yeah. Why don't you bring it here in studio? This is absolutely beautiful. Who snapped this photo, first of all?
So this photo.
Here, let me grab this, and you go back in front of your microphone.
Yeah, that would probably help, wouldn't it? This photo was taken by Vanessa LeCain on Chain Lakes between Banff and Jasper out on her kayak. And I had started last year taking photos from Dr. Darren Markland, who was out in the River Valley at dawn, taking these great pictures. But then I'd taken, vandalized them. Turn them into...
You add kind of a neat digital touch to them. How do you describe what you do?
Well, I've got all the toys in the world for art, mostly because I was doing record covers. I've been a musician since I was a kid and in bands and whatnot. So you get all these tools to make your covers and all that stuff. And I have a few very cool filters that I then take into Photoshop and basically hand paint over again to make sure that at 300 dots per inch it shows up as a painting.
Well, the results are stunning, and then you obviously blow them up on a canvas.
Yeah,
and have them stretched, and people they're ready to hang.
Yeah,
they look beautiful.
It's and people have been very happy because we were able to give pretty good value. We did this last year to raise money for Ukraine humanitarian relief. We ended up donating almost $12,000 to the campaign from McKasick and Stelmach, paid for a C-can of electrical equipment to go to Ukraine to repair their substations and whatnot that had been targeted by war. So we felt very good about that, but it really opened my eyes to the opportunity for fundraising using art. I had the good fortune to be elected treasurer in my Kiwanis Club, and then the misfortune to be re-elected treasurer a number of times. Fundraising for organizations is always hard. And what I got out of the experience we had last year was that there's good margins in these things.
Yeah.
And if you do it right, you can do it so that everybody benefits, that the artist benefits, the organization benefits. And I think that's what's been missing. It's kind of a rotary thing, right? There's a 4-way rotary test, and the two important things: is it fair, and does everybody benefit?
Yeah.
And that's what's been missing in using art for fundraising, is that the artists have not really benefited. So we're coming at this as an artist agency. We want to help artists make a living. Our research has shown us that the dead artists don't need the money. And so for every campaign that we do through this program, we split the proceeds 50% to the net to the cause, 30% to the artists, and then 20% to us as the agency to keep things going. We found that's been really well accepted, that people think that's fair. And for us, we can take, a very limited amount of copyright from an artist and hopefully turn that into sales of, hundreds of prints that, give them back some thousands of dollars.
That's really neat. And people can read more about it at artforgood.ca again, and about the specific, this initiative, raising money for the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship, but also more generally speaking about the model as you've described it and how it all works. This is a type of situation where someone orders this online. It'll be shipped right to their door.
Shipped right to their door.
There's no hassle beyond that. They just go. They choose whatever size they want. I see that the price range is fantastic, so people can get a smaller print for as small as $35, and all the way up to $325 for the big one, like the one you've got here in studio.
The big one's actually bigger than this.
A little bit bigger than this. That's what, 40 by 48, I think.
Yeah, this one's 40 by 30.
Okay.
And after getting this one in, I decided that it could be a real statement piece.
Yeah. 36 by 48 is the big one. So people can pick their size. Obviously, it looks stunning, ready to be hung like this, and then obviously framed. This would look just next level. All in support of the scholarship. Really appreciate that. Does this mean then that are there opportunities for other artists, photographers, people that maybe would see a fit, and that maybe even, I don't know, do you take suggestions on which nonprofits you might work with?
Yes.
I mean, if a photographer says, I've got a shot of Peyto Lake that'll take your breath away, and I'd love to raise money for Alzheimer's, for example, that's something you could work with them on?
Absolutely. We've already been approached by a number of fairly major charities to create campaigns for this next year. These particular ones where I take someone else's photograph and work with them, I'm happy to do that and donate artist fees to the cause. So for this one, because it's close to the heart for both Vanessa and I lost my wife Holly the same time that just before Julie.
Oh.
And so I feel, a very strong connection to her family, and trying to help with this, I think, is a great. It makes me feel good. So
I can tell that by your face, man. Yeah.
But for other ones, we are definitely looking for more artists. We're hoping to get up to about 200 campaigns a year, which we think we can handle with the sort of size of organization we've got.
Did you say 200 campaigns a year?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, we think we can do one a day for 40 weeks a year. And
who's administering this? You?
I used to have 400 staff. I don't really have I'm not.
Wow,
I'm
man.
not adverse to taking on big projects, right?
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, we're thrilled that you've chosen this one, and that scholarship. For people to know of interest, we're actually, so the way that the application process goes, so every year people can check out ryanjespersen.com/scholarship. It's a $5,000 annual support for a post-secondary student anywhere in Canada, per Julie's wishes, that's lost a parent to cancer. And actually tonight, this evening, our editorial board will meet the evening of August 14th. They're the ones that will be going through. We've provided them with a short list of applicants that meet all the criteria. That's where we leave it. We don't narrow it down from there. If you've met all the criteria, we pass it along to the editorial board. Tonight, they will be selecting the recipient of the scholarship this year. So the timing of this announcement is very meaningful, David.
That's perfect.
And it means a lot to us. And obviously, we're going to pick this up and support this as best we can along with you. And so we'll be telling our audience about this, reminding them in the days to come. And is there a certain number? Like, can we sell this out?
Oh, with this one, it's unlimited.
Okay, so we can keep producing them.
Yeah, with most campaigns, what we're doing is trying to set a number. So if you want to do a project, tell us what that number is. Let's say it's $5,000.
Got it.
If we raise more than $5,000 for your project, we're going to take that money and apply it to other projects that haven't sold out yet or haven't met their goal yet, for the very simple reason that it's art. You don't know which ones are going to be hits and which ones are going to be flops, and you won't know until you put them in the marketplace. You want to set this down before your arms die? And so we've also had really good response with that. And this is where it comes from my experience as a fundraiser before, right? If we can avoid losing money, we can keep the profit margins tight and still share this with everybody and still have a business. So that's really the fundamental of what we're trying to do, is to take the advantages that any group has in terms of having a network of people that want to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
And then giving them the opportunity to make money with stuff that's meaningful to their audience, right?
I love it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to traveling the whole province and shooting and creating paintings. I've got my oil paints back out after several years, so we'll be having some of that sort of stuff coming on. Actually, it's funny, my oil painting now is inspired by my digital vandalism.
Yeah.
but I'm really looking forward to also the new artists we've got coming on. We have some that we'll be bringing on this week. And just, I'm looking forward to having a huge catalog of fantastic art that shows this province in all its beauty, because it is a bloody beautiful place. It's the most beautiful place in the world. I love it here. I love this place. I'm not leaving. And we'll just make sure that, people's power rates go down.
We knew you'd find a way to bring this all back to electricity. I love that. David D.K. Gray, a wonderful friend of this show, again at Art for Good. That's the number 4, artforgood.ca.
Let me just
you got these little guys
show
you brought
off
in here. What's
this one. So this is the second campaign that we started.
What's that, 12 by 12?
Just a little 12
small
by 12.
little print,
we sell these. There's actually 4 of them. We sell them in a set. These are for Fern's Animal Sanctuary. There's a wonderful animal sanctuary that takes animals that can't be adopted or put up anywhere else. So horses, pigs. She has the craziest turkey you've ever seen.
Oh, and that's saying something.
And if you really want a timeline cleanse, just go looking for baby goats.
Is this ferns with an E?
No, ferns with an F.
No, but at the end, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like Ferns Animal Sanctuary, Ferns Acres Animal
Ferns
Sanctuary.
Acres Animal Sanctuary.
Yeah,
I got it wrong.
Where their slogan is straight out of the gully. I am intrigued big time. Johnny wants to open an animal sanctuary, him and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I can
just
see
for
I
his
can
hard
see
party
you.
and
I can
friends?
see you paying close attention over there, Johnny. Look at this.
My goal is to retire and just paint sheep and cows that are retired as well.
Yeah.
They're hard to paint because they keep moving.
They keep moving.
You need a sprayer.
This is funny because I just recently bought my wife like an entire paint set.
Did you really?
So it's at home. It's not cracked yet, but
very
it's
cool.
something she wants to take up as well.
I love that.
Art is how we share those parts of being a human that are hard to communicate.
Ah, well said. People have all kinds of questions now about this art. This is a good
what
one
size is that print? People are asking.
What's this? 36 by
That one's 30 by 40.
30 by 40. So that's a good size. That's kind of like your. I mean, that's a good. That'll fill a wall nicely. I mean, it's all relatively speaking. How big is your wall? But
because marketing, we always call the biggest one the Executive Deluxe Edition.
oh well, now of course you know that we're gonna need to get the Executive Deluxe size. John, we're gonna have to pick up some new office space so we can hang the bigger one. We've got some people asking if you have cityscapes. Do you have cityscapes?
Well, we have the 2 original ones that we started with last year.
What's that one there? Can you grab that one over there? You've had one. This was a Darren Markland. People know Darren Markland. He's an ER doc, rather ICU doc, and obviously has been he's like a social media star for what he's been posting through the course of the pandemic. But here's one, a beautiful one of Edmonton's Walterdale Bridge. That looks, what's that looking west, right?
That is looking east,
or is it looking
I think,
east?
off the high level towards...
Right. It's heading north, that bridge from the U of A, up to Grow Road,
and then we have one other one, which is a sunset of downtown.
Okay.
That kind of matches.
So capital cityscapes, in a way.
Yeah.
And what was this a fundraiser for?
This is for Ukraine humanitarian relief. So
this is the one you told us about.
This is the one...
This one raised about 15 Gs?
Yeah, this one raised about half of that.
Wow. The color that you use, I know this might be annoying for people on the podcast. Apologies, but you can check it out on YouTube, and we're going to we'll put these pictures all over our social channels. But you really, the way that light is exploding through those clouds, you've really captured that on canvas, which isn't always the easiest to do.
That's the funny thing about this is that, I mean, it's a little digital abstraction.
Yeah.
Right? It's if you look at the math of it, it's all matrix algebra, looking for edges and then doing funny things when you find them. But those are the actual colors of our sky, right? That's the just because they're put into these blocks, the actual real natural beauty of our city shines through better with a little bit of abstraction.
Yeah.
But it's our skies are unbelievable, right? When people come here from other places.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People talk about, I remember my buddy Stu said this once. He lives, we gave a shout out to Brooks the other day. Stu spends a lot of time out on Lake Newell. And I remember camping with him once near Lake Newell. And he looked up and he just said, there's nothing like a prairie sky.
There is not.
And he was bang on about that.
That's the one thing that I've noticed as I've adopted this artist thing. Because it's kind of weird for me. I spent a year, or a career in a very, very, very dry technical field.
Sure.
And now I switch over to doing this stuff, and people are responding to it well, and it's like, geez, why didn't I do this years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe I wasn't ready.
Well, I think we'll need to shuffle some things around here in the studio because we got to put it. I've always liked the way that the shot we have. J-Cat, we have a photo from a very talented Cree artist in Edmonton, John Cardinal, that you can see in Johnny's wide shot. Johnny, do you mind taking your shot there? You see that there on that feature wall behind Johnny. But I think, whether it's a temporary move or not, we always like to move our art around in the studio. I think maybe we'll hang this one here so people will be reminded, and obviously we'll support the campaign. People will be reminded when they see that image that they can do something to help that scholarship go. And we want to get that scholarship up to $100,000 as soon as possible. Yeah. This campaign, put it this way, with where we're at with that scholarship fund, we've worked in partnership with the Edmonton Community Foundation.
Yeah.
If this one does as well as your Markland one did, that'll push us over 100 Gs.
Awesome.
So that would be sweet.
Hey guys,
we'd love that.
You heard the challenge.
There you go.
Let's get at it.
Let's get at it. Hey man, thanks. You've always been. This is our first time hanging out in person, but you've always been such a good friend to the show, and I appreciate. We kind of thought, well, how will we do this? I told the audience last week you were booked to come on here and talk about the philanthropy and the fundraiser and all that before ahead of time anyway.
Yeah.
And then of course as this story just exploded. Last couple of weeks about the wind and solar, moratorium and all that kind of stuff, and it just felt obvious that we needed to deepen our conversation with you.
I feel an obligation of public service because of the opportunity that I had through a Crown-owned corporation and then 2 government departments to learn what I've learned, and be what I am. Consumers in Alberta need better representation, and the policymakers in Alberta need to think more about consumers.
Simply said. There you have it. It's David Gray. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealDK Gray. Did you have imposters? Did you have other people coming at trying to get the DK Gray handle? Was that the...
Yeah, I've got a screen capture of all the ones that are trying to be me.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, there's no way. You're never going to pull off this haircut.
Okay. Nicely said. The cue ball. You could, of course, learn more about supporting this fundraiser again by checking out the show notes in this episode. This conversation has been presented by our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. It makes sense, doesn't it, David? They're Western Canada's busiest solar installer, and there's a few things that they want you focusing on right now. That is number one, the fact that when you work with Kubi, you can do so with confidence. We know that this is an investment for you. We know even just the simple fact of getting people up on your roof, having somebody that might need to get into your attic, there's a trust factor there. You want to know they're not going to screw it up. You want to know that they're going to do it right. Well, Kubi was recently voted the best solar installation company in Kamloops. They are, bar none, the most experienced solar installer across Western Canada, and they're committed to making your transition to solar simple and stress-free. You can get in touch with them today for a free quote, whether it's for your residence, whether it's for a commercial property, hell, whether or not it's for your farm. You can learn more at kubienergy.ca. A lot of talk about emissions, and for obvious reasons. We know that the oil and gas industry, and particularly the oil sands, drive Alberta's economy, but we know that oil sands operations contribute significant carbon emissions in Canada. So, the 6 largest companies are working together and with governments to take strides on the path to net zero from their operations. Part of that plan includes developing a proposed carbon capture and storage network by 2030. It's going to be one of the world's largest. You can learn more about this project by checking out pathwaysalliance.ca. Are you a professional engineer in Canada and you desperately need a change of pace? You need to leave the lousy place you're working because they don't appreciate you, they don't challenge you, and they didn't even have a Christmas party? You're going to need to check out apexautomation.ca today. They're hiring professional engineers and soon-to-be graduates that were looking to work in the field of electrical engineering, instrumentation, computer science, process engineering, mechanical engineering. If you're an instrument tech, an electrician, Apex wants to hear from you. It's an amazing place to work. They've got projects going on the regular in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, into the territories, down in the Lone Star State. They've just opened a field office down in Texas. You can kickstart the next phase in your career by checking out the careers link on their website. That's apexautomation.ca. And a shout out to our friends at Local Environmental Services. Still, day in, day out, they believe that communities deserve better. They're not just about garbage. They're not just about recycling or water hauling or fence rentals or landfill services, portable toilet, you name it. I mean, yeah, they do that all in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but they believe that you and your community deserves better service, better prices, and more support for local causes. They are your full-service environmental solutions partner. If you're a decision maker for a business, big or small, or for a municipality anywhere in Alberta and Saskatchewan, request a quote, start saving money today at localenvironmental.ca. Coming up on tomorrow's Real Talk, we got an email from a Real Talker, but not just an average, ordinary Real Talker. This is one that runs a CFL podcast. He didn't like what our group chat roundtable had to say about not just the Edmonton Elks, but the Canadian Football League, so he's going to come on and argue his case tomorrow. He says the future is bright and sunny. And speaking of sunny ways, I can't announce an interview, but we're working on one and it looks good. Let's say a high-profile federal politician. Chances are better than not that she will join us on Tuesday's Real Talk. We hope you will too.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive